Welcome to CI/CD Summer School. How are you doing? I'm your host, Michael Jenkins, and I'm glad to have you back for another session of CI/CD Summer School. While I'm giving the intro, feel free to drop your location in the chat. Let me know where you're joining from. Let me know where you're watching from if you're watching the replay, so I can connect with you on LinkedIn or YouTube, the two main places where this stream is being delivered. Just a little bit of background on CI/CD Summer School. I started it last year, kind of as a homage, or I was inspired by the Planet Money podcast. I'm a big fan of economics, along with cloud computing, automation, CI/CD, and all that good stuff. And every summer for the past, I believe, 6 or 7 years, they've had what they call their Planet Money Summer School. So they take all the content from their previous episodes, even going back years, and focus in on a topic for, let's say, like 7 or 8 episodes. And they really dial into, or, dive into those topics. And they even have guest professors that come in and join the host of the podcast. At the end of the CI/CD Summer School, they have a quiz. And then they also offer degrees, some sort of digital documentation that says, hey, I went to Planet Money Summer School. So last year I was like, we could do the same thing for CI/CD, for DevOps, for cloud, for automation. So I was like, hey, let's do it. Let's have CI/CD Summer School. Last year I did a 7 or 8 week session of CI/CD Summer School, a different session each week with assignments, with focused topics, examples, and so on. And it was my intent and my drive to bring that same format back for 2025. So here we are in a sort of condensed version of that summer school format. We're only going to have 2 sessions. We're not going to drag it out all summer long. We're already at the end of summer for most places. Most of y'all, or some of y'all, if you're already in school, you're already back in school. So we're running out of summer to have CI/CD Summer School, right? So this week and this week only, we're going to have 2 sessions. Of course, this being the first, the kickoff. And then we're going to have a follow-up session on Wednesday. I'll give some more details on that towards the end of this particular session. But yeah, we're going to condense our whole CI/CD Summer School down into 2 sessions, and we're going to have a good time with it. So I'm just happy to be here. I'm so glad that you're joining me for this live stream. I'm glad that you're checking out the replay. If you're watching this on LinkedIn or on YouTube, thanks so much for joining me. So I'm going to check the chats real quick. And right out of the gate, I got my man, Tech Coach Ralph, joining the stream. Sir, I just want to give you the salute. Thank you so much for joining me. I do my best to keep up with your content. Y'all, if you're not following Tech Coach Ralph, I don't know what you're doing, but this man is dropping just like the most up-to-date and current knowledge of the tech scene daily. And I mean, every day this man is dropping new content on YouTube. So please give him a follow, give him a shout out. And yeah, again, thanks for joining us, Tech Coach Ralph, on the stream. So for this particular session of CI/CD Summer School, like I said, we're only going to have 2 sessions. So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of theory. Last summer, we dove deep into what does CI/CD really even mean? Like, what are some of the core tenets of CI/CD Summer School? And perhaps in the notes for this one, I'll link to some of those old episodes where we talked about canary deployments. We talked about blue-green deployments. We talked about CI/CD in general and what it means to actually package code, deploy it, deliver it, and so on. We're not going to get into all of that because, again, if you were rocking with me last summer, you already got that under your belt. You're already a pro. You know how that works. If you're just joining me for the first time, we're going to have a very, very quick overview of CI/CD, what it means. We're going to talk about a sample CI/CD pipeline, and then we're going to focus on how that pipeline is implemented using GitHub Actions. Why GitHub Actions, you might ask? And I'm going to go to my slides now because slides help me stay on track. So over this past summer, I've been working on several courses for LinkedIn Learning, and I'm just using this to kind of represent me in the studio, wrapping up some of the live action for one of my courses, Learning GitHub Actions. So what I wanted to do was bring some of the topics from that course to CI/CD Summer School while it's still fresh on my mind. Like, I'm just out of the studio on some of this stuff, right? So I want to share it with you so you can also have the benefit of getting like the preview of some of the things that I cover in this course, Learning GitHub Actions, which will be available sometime in the next few months or so, maybe even sooner than that, on the LinkedIn Learning platform. But I'm so just kind of like enthralled or just kind of like absorbed with GitHub Actions right now that was totally top of mind. So I was like, you know what, CI/CD Summer School, this one good session that we're going to have to talk about CI/CD, let's take a closer look at GitHub Actions. I see a couple more comments coming in. I got an anonymous LinkedIn user, and this is probably a bad on my part, the platform that I'm using, StreamYard. It doesn't always capture the LinkedIn ID of the user who's posted the comment. But if you're joining me from Colombia, South America, thank you for joining me on this particular stream. And then we got another one from Tech Coach Ralph. He says he's been working on migrating a lovable vibe-coded app to a different cloud provider, forcing me to get better with CI/CD. Yeah, hopefully we can like shed some light on some of the steps that you might be going through in this particular stream. If not, holler at me and we'll make sure we get you covered. So yeah, I've been wrapping up some courses. Learning GitHub Actions was one of the main ones. And before we get into the GitHub stuff, like I said, we're going to have a very quick, very high level overview of continuous integration and continuous deployment. These are pretty much the tenets of modern software development at scale. You got to have some CI, you got to have some CD in your process if you really want to build and deploy software with the big boys or like the big boys, you know what I'm saying? So let's break down these two topics very quickly. The first of these is continuous integration. So the goal of continuous integration is to resolve problems early on in the development process. You don't want to get all the way out to deploying some code and have problems pop up that you could have resolved way, way, way early in your development cycle. And we do this by combining code regularly. That's where the continuous and the integration part of it comes from. If you have a group of developers working on a code base, these developers are working on their own particular features, but they're combining their code, they're integrating it in a common repository on a regular basis. So that could be every day, could be every week if you're working on sprints or something like that, but you're not going to wait until the end of a 3, 4, 5-month cycle, year-long cycle, and then bring everybody's code together and kind of see if it works, right? You're doing that process more often so that you can work out these bugs regularly. And that's where that testing comes into play, because as you're integrating your code, you're also triggering tests that exercise the code and make sure it's linted properly, make sure it doesn't have any formatting or syntactical errors, and make sure it actually does what it's supposed to do. I mean, what would be the point of pushing code that doesn't work, that doesn't do or provide its intended function? So we're running tests with pretty much every push to the repository. Now let's go to continuous deployment. And some might even say continuous delivery as well, because there's really 2 Ds in the CD portion of CI/CD, right? There's continuous delivery, where we're delivering an artifact, and we'll even talk about that when we get to our pipeline here, our sample pipeline. But then there's the actual deployment, where you're taking whatever you've built, that software, into some artifact, and you're placing it into a position where people can actually use it. Now, in some cases, that deployment might just be putting a exe available for somebody to download, right? Or it might be actually taking some compiled thing and turning it on, right? So people can access a mobile app, or they can access a website or a database or something along those lines. So in the delivery and deployment portion of our pipeline, we're compiling the code into artifacts, we're storing that artifact. And another key portion is we're actually running tests on that artifact inside the pipeline. So we're actually using our own code before we allow anybody else to use it. Because again, that's another opportunity for us to catch errors early before we get embarrassed by our users telling us, hey man, your code doesn't work. So we want to catch those things early. And then, as I mentioned, we deploy those artifacts for use, either putting it in place where people can download it and use it on their systems, or deploying it into some sort of running compute environment where we can access it for ourselves. Okay, this is our simple pipeline that we're going to be working with today. And I'm going to walk through each steps of this pipeline with the focus on the step that's highlighted in green. Ideally, we're going to have a pipeline that's triggered by a push to a repository. That push, more than likely, you're working on your code. Maybe you've created a branch and you're working on your branch. You push the code up to the central repository, and that's where GitHub Actions is going to kick in. If you're on GitLab CI, that's where GitLab, or rather, if you're on GitLab, that's where GitLab CI is going to kick in. If you're on Bitbucket, that's where Bitbucket Pipelines is going to kick in. All these platforms have very, very similar operations where they can be triggered from pushes to the repository to kick off this automation. You can also use pull requests to kick off different workflows. And the really, really cool thing about GitHub is they have more triggers than I've ever seen on any platform. You can trigger workflows by somebody starring your repository. You can trigger workflows by somebody creating an issue or making some other comment on your code inside GitHub. So they've got tons of triggers that we can use as automators, as DevOps practitioners to start our workflows. But if anything else, we're pushing code, we're triggering the pipeline, starting with this push, right? The first thing we're going to do is lint and test our code. Linting is just making sure that the code meets specifications for the language, making sure that we don't have any unused variables, libraries that we imported and didn't use because we thought we were going one direction and then we ended up not. We just want to make sure our code is clean. So we're getting a lint roller and we're brushing the shoulders of our literal code off to make sure it's clean, right? So once our code is linted, then we can test it. In this particular case, we're running tests that are fast. These are unit tests. So they're very small. They're testing the core functionality of very specific functions and how they operate. So we want these tests to be fast so that we can iterate on this process. If we push our code, automation kicks off, and it takes hours to run our tests, then we're going to lose interest. We're going to move on to something else, and we're going to forget where we were. But if we can get feedback very quickly, then we can say, oh, okay, I just need to pull this variable out. We're going to pull this variable out. We're going to remove this unused library. We're going to reformat our code and so on. And then we're going to push again to trigger that pipeline again, just to kind of keep that process going very quickly. So very early on, we want to work out the bugs, work out the kinks, make sure we got good code, make sure our test is working as specified, and then we're going to move on to building an artifact or creating an artifact. I'm going to pause there. Before I move on, check out the comments here. And we had Carlos joining us from Colombia. Thanks, Carlos, for joining us. Thanks for IDing yourself, man. Really do appreciate that, because as you can see, LinkedIn doesn't always identify the folks from the LinkedIn side. Appreciate it. And of course, Tech Coach Ralph, always on the cutting edge. He's using Gemini to create custom workflows to interact with TeamCity. TeamCity being another CI/CD or automation platform. Shout out to the folks at JetBrains for bringing that one out. So yeah, you can definitely use AI to tap into some of your CI/CD workflow development for sure. Okay, let's get into the build phase. Now, the build phase is where we're running the steps that actually take our code and compile it into some sort of artifact, right? For this particular session, for this CI/CD summer school, we're talking about containers, right? So we're going to be talking about building container images. GitHub Actions and any other CI/CD platform that you're working with, automation platform, they're not limited to containers. If you're working with C++ applications, then you're going to bring out GCC. If you're using Java, or you're working with Java, then you're going to use your jar builder, your Java C, Java compiler. If you're running Golang, you're going to bring out your Go compiler, and so on and so forth. Basically, all you're doing is taking your human readable code and you're compiling it into some sort of binary that we can store somewhere and use on the intended platform. Let me go to my next slide because I think I got something there. Yes. It's not really spelled out in this particular pipeline per se, but this build step is also going to store the artifact after it's built. Now, again, I mentioned we're working with container images in this particular session. So we're actually storing the image itself, like Docker build, whatever. We're tagging that image and we're storing it in a container registry. GitHub provides GitHub packages. So we can store our container image right next to our container pipeline, right next to our code. And it just makes things so easy for development. Another thing that I love about GitHub Actions is just they bring all the tools very close to where the code lives, and it just makes it easy for development. We could also push code to Docker Hub. All the cloud providers have their own artifact registries. We've got Elastic Container Registry, Google Cloud Artifacts. Azure has their artifacts. I forget what the name of their artifact registry is called, but everybody's got a place where you can store the code. And that actually gets important when we get to the deploy step, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I just wanted to kind of call out that we're building the thing, but we got to put it somewhere where we can use it, right? Okay. If you're joining the stream and you're like, what is a container image? I don't want to leave you behind. I know we're going to talk about containers in this particular session of CI/CD Summer School, but like I mentioned earlier, this session is brief, right? I only got 2 sessions with y'all, today and Wednesday, so I don't have time to get into a full discussion of a container, how to build it, the Docker commands that go around it. So what I want you to do, this is your homework. What I want you to do, if you're not familiar with containers, is go into Google and then Google docs.docker.com, what is a container image? Now, even with that specifying docs.docker.com, you might get another link, as you can see in this image here, saying what is a container? And then you get another link that says what is a container. Don't go to that first link. It's very much geared towards marketing and just kind of giving you the very like high level idea of what a container is. Maybe that's acceptable if you really want to get that high level view. But what I want you to do is go to the documentation, that next link. Go to that link, and there's YouTube videos there where the DevRel team at Docker is explaining what a Docker container is, how to use them, how to set up your system, and what it means to operate software as a container image. So please don't think that I'm abandoning you by not going into detail what a container image is. I want you to exercise this homework, Google Docker docs, what is a container, and then follow up on the Docker website. I got a question. I'll pause here while you guys are catching up on that from Tech Coach Ralph. How would you decide which cloud provider should to go about learning first? You know, that's a very good question. In the example that we're going to see, I actually use Google Cloud, which is kind of a I don't know. It's kind of a one-off for a lot of people, particularly when you're trying to educate software, or, trying to teach software development, because everybody goes to AWS. There are so many cloud providers out there that it's really, I don't know. I feel like people sell themselves short when they just jump on AWS out of the gate and say, oh, you got to learn AWS. You got to learn AWS. Now, it's very helpful to learn AWS because they are one of the leading cloud providers out there, right? But you also got Azure, you also got Google Cloud. So I would say start with the platform that you have access to. Now, coming out of the gate, everybody has access to all of these platforms, especially if you have a Gmail address. Now, I think this is one of the benefits of Google Cloud that they really don't push. They really don't kind of make this aware for I don't know, at least I haven't seen it in their cloud spaces when they're trying to get people onto the platform, right? If you have a Gmail address, guess what? You have a Google Cloud account. all you have to do is log into, I think it's console.google.com or it might be something along those lines. If you're logged into a session where you're logged into your Gmail account in a browser and you Google like Google Cloud or GCP console and click that link, guess what? You just logged into your Google account. You may have to set up some, you might have to add a credit card to get, like your, what do I want to say, like your billing set up and that type of thing, but you get free credits right out of the gate. With any other cloud platform, you really have to be intentional about starting with that platform, right? You have to go to aws.signup.free or something like that, right? You have to create your account, then you have to log in, you have to set it all up. Same thing with Azure. With Google, the onboarding is so easy and their interface is very, very clean that it's just a very nice platform to get started with. So I kind of jumped around all over on that question, Tech Coach Ralph, but I'm going to say start with the platform that you have the easiest access to. If you're working somewhere and they give you credits to learn AWS, then do that. If you're working in an Azure shop or you have like the desire or the aspirations to get into an Azure shop, start with Azure and then just learn the fundamentals of cloud. And I guarantee you, once you learn those fundamentals, they're going to apply all across the board because everything's pretty much the same. All the cloud platforms, they provide the same similar service, and then you can take those skills and move on to somewhere else. I've got a couple more questions coming to the chat. I'm going to hold them so we can get through this pipeline and get to the demo, because the next step is the test stage in our pipeline. I hope you didn't forget, we're still going through this pipeline. In this case, I wanted to show that we're testing the actual image that was built. We're not running unit tests, which test the software directly in the pipeline. We're calling the functions and testing the output against some known input. In this case, we're doing the same thing, but we're actually pulling the image from wherever we stored it. And in our case, it's going to be GitHub container registry, GitHub platform, GitHub package registry. I get the names confused. But we're actually pulling that image down. We're running our Docker commands on that image, and then we're testing the output. So this is another good integration test because we're testing it just like we would in our deployment before we get to the deployment. So again, if we encounter any bugs, any problems, any situations like that, we can work them out in our pipeline before we get to somebody else actually trying to deploy the code. But that if everything goes well in the test stage, then we get to the deploy stage. Now, again, deploy is funky, right? Because in some cases, deploy could just mean taking whatever you built and putting it somewhere so somebody can download it. So in this case, the target might be another container registry. I might just be pushing this image into Elastic Container Registry in AWS. I might be pushing it into Google Cloud, or I might be using that image to actually deploy to a running service. And we'll see an example of that here once we get to our workflow. But before I do that, because this is, I think, the last slide before we get to the demo, we got one more question. Can I learn DevOps, as I assume that's what we mostly use CI/CD automations for, without any technical knowledge? Well, there's a lot of levels to this question. I'll say thank you very much for the question. Because CI/CD is for everybody. I mean, dev and ops, if you say DevOps, it kind of breaks down the camp, right, into the developers and the operators. But everybody needs to be using CI/CD. If you're a software engineer and you're writing code, you're going to be pushing it to a repo. Hopefully that repo or your workflow process has integrations and automation set up to run it. And that's where your quote unquote DevOps kind of runs into. Let me speak a little bit closer to this question. Because in my opinion, DevOps is for everybody. It's for and this I'm gonna get to your answer in just a minute. You'll see how. As an operator, you need to be a DevOps practitioner because you need to automate things. As a software developer, you need to be able to interface with operators and know how your CI/CD pipelines work. As a project manager, you need to know how your software engineers are integrating their code so you can follow how your features are being deployed to the product. So you can follow how your features are being tracked through the product, how they're being tested, and so on. And I mean, you could take it up even further levels into management and so on. Now, with that said, The question being without any technical knowledge. I'm going to say yes and no. If you want to actually implement a CI/CD pipeline, if you want to be a true DevOps practitioner and exercise some automation, then you're going to need to get down close to the metal, right? You're going to need to know how to interface with a GitHub Actions, with a Jenkins, with a GitLab CI, with Bitbucket pipelines, and so on and so forth. If you don't have the technical know-how, then you're going to have a very difficult time in implementing CI/CD pipelines. Now, let's take one step back from being that like super technical person that knows how to script, they know how to write YAML, they know how to do all the things, right? If you can read the code and understand what the code is doing, then you still have a better idea of how to interface with the people who are writing the code. And maybe you're a TPM, a technical project manager. And maybe you're looking at a workflow and you say, okay, I see your workflow and I see how you're testing this feature. Is it possible to add another test here? Or why is this test taking so long? Can you explain it to me? And so on and so forth. Because you've read the workflow, you've seen the output, and you kind of know, how the thing runs or how it should run. That still takes a little bit of technical know-how, right? So now let's take a total complete step back from that. And let's say you're in marketing. And now I know some very, very technical people in marketing. So don't think that I'm like trying to call out the marketing people, right? All I'm saying is in marketing, you might not interface with the code directly. You might not interface with the software developers and the DevOps practitioners and the admins directly. But let's say you need to deploy something. Let's say the developers finish the feature, they push the code, and somebody forgot to press deploy. And it's Friday at 5 o'clock, and the customer really needs this feature deployed. Maybe you shouldn't deploy on Friday. We'll say it's Thursday. It would be helpful if you knew how to log into GitHub Actions. Hopefully the team set up an account for you, and you know where to go in the GitHub Actions interface. You know how to find that button that says, press this thing to deploy, and you press it, and maybe, you say a prayer to a higher power, and then you hope that the deployment goes well. And then you know how to follow up also with the technical team tomorrow, so that you can make sure everything was deployed. And maybe you pull them to the side and say, hey, show me how to run this thing so that I can deploy when the code's ready, and I don't have to wait on you guys. I don't have to bother you guys to deploy it. So very, very long answer to that question. Excellent question. I think that everybody can learn DevOps practices. It just depends on how involved you want to be with implementing those practices. That's really what's going to tie back to your technical knowledge, or how much technical knowledge is required. Okay, let's get back to our slides again. I use the slides to keep me on track. Otherwise, I would go off the rails here. And this last slide just kind of pulls everything together, right? We've got the push. We're going to lint and test. We're going to build. We're going to store our artifact in some sort of registry. And then we're going to pull from that registry. We're going to test. And then once we get to the deploy stage, we're going to actually apply our artifact somewhere, some type of target, another registry, perhaps outside of GitHub, or perhaps we're going to actually use it to run an application. Okay, with that in mind, let's go to a demonstration. Now, I'm going to pause here for a second to see if there's any other questions in the chat, because I'm going to give you all like just a minute to follow this link. bit.ly/CICD 2025 is going to take you to this repository, automate 6500/mascot-API. If you're sitting at a computer and you just want to follow through with your phone, you can scan the QR code there, and that will take you to the repo. Yeah, I'll give you the salute. I'm not going to try to butcher your name, sir, but thank you so much for your question, and I'm glad that my response was helpful to you. And I'm scrolling back here to see if there's any other comments. I think we covered just about everything. Okay, we're all up to speed. Everybody got that? You got the demonstration all set? Okay, cool. I'm going to cut over to that particular screen. And I'm going to go to this tab here. The way that I've got my screen set up, I'm not going to be able to see the comments for a second, but I'll come back to it as I'm flying through this. Okay, so what we're seeing now is the GitHub Actions interface, right? And if you look into this section of the screen that I'm scrolling here, it looks very similar to that pipeline that we sort of described, right? The the pipeline plan that we had, where we said we're going to, on every push, we're going to lint and test our code, we're going to build it, we're going to test the image, and then we're going to deploy it somewhere. And as I mentioned, in this particular application, we're using Google Cloud Run. So you'll see that here in just a second. But yeah, I just wanted to show, like, this is an interface. It's very approachable. You know, GitHub Actions, they got it, or GitHub rather, they got it all laid out for you. You can see everything here, very nice. I love the representation of the pipeline so that you can actually see the steps as they are ordered, and we'll see how that happens in the code. You can also see the jobs that are run over here on the side. So it's very, very approachable to know, like, what's going on in your pipeline. And this is all defined by a workflow file that's written in YAML. And we're just, I'm pulling this up to the screen now, just to kind of show, this is code. I almost hate bringing code to the screen and talking about it, because it's hard for people to follow along sometimes. But I just want to walk through some of the parts of this particular workflow that spell out the particular jobs that you see over here on the left. First of all, like I mentioned, our trigger, we're going to run this pipeline, this workflow on every push to the repository. And we also have in GitHub Actions a workflow dispatch trigger, which basically means we can trigger it manually. If you add this as a trigger to your pipeline or to your workflow file, it just means there's a button in the interface that you can click to say, hey, run this workflow right now. I set up some environment variables. The name of this service is Mascot API. We'll see how that's applied here in a little bit. First job up is lint and tests. We check out the code. I set up Python for version 3.3.13. We install the requirements, lint some code, and then we run our unit tests. And this is probably like the most key portion of this stage, right? You could have linting separate and you could have testing separate. Because these operations are so fast, I usually just put them into one stage together. But the test is really the most important part of this entire thing, right? So next up is our build stage. And now we saw in the interface how it was a true pipeline, right? Like we had the lint and test followed by build. To get that to happen in GitHub Actions, you have to provide this particular keyword, or let me just highlight the keyword, needs. If you have a job, and this string here represents the name of the build job, if you want this job to follow another job, you have to say that job needs the previous job, right? If you don't do this, then what GitHub Actions will do is run the two jobs concurrently or at the same time. In some cases, that's very beneficial, because you might want to speed up your test line or your workflow, your pipeline, by testing and linting at the same time that you're building, if your workflow can handle that, right? But usually you want to wait, right? Because you don't want to build bad code. So you want your linting and testing to finish before you start to build. So that's kind of how you build that into your pipeline. This stage also has some permissions. We're giving it permissions to write to the packages service, GitHub packages, after the image is built. So once again, we're checking out the code. We do some setup for Docker build X. We also have to log into the GitHub container registry. We give it a username. GitHub.actor is going to be our username, or whoever triggered and ran the pipeline, along with a predefined secret that has a GitHub token. GitHub creates this for you. It's a ephemeral secret. It only lasts for the life cycle of this, or the life of this workflow run. So it's very secure in that aspect, and it provides the authentication to the packages registry. Using some other actions, we get the metadata, and then we create tags and tag the image. This particular step right here, build and push the container image, it does almost all the work. Like, you could build a very manual pipeline that says Docker tag, Docker build, Docker push, and all those commands. But this one particular action, and I guess I really didn't describe what an action is. Give me a second to get back to that. It bundles all those steps together and does all the work for us. We just have to give it the parameters that it needs to build and push the image for us. But yeah, actions are just that. They're just bundled code. They're also container images. They're JavaScript packages. And those are the primary ways that GitHub Actions lets you, what I want to say, like, codify repeated steps for a workflow, and then you could store those somewhere, perhaps in a container registry, perhaps in a GitHub repository, and then it pulls that code into your workflow and runs those steps for you repeatedly. I'm going to pause there before I go on to the deploy step, or rather the test image step, and go back to see if there's any questions here on that. All right. Okay. Test image is the next one. Is where we have the needs build. So it's definitely going to run after the build step. And this is where we also log into the container registry, and then we pull the image from the GitHub container registry. So the image that we literally just built, I mean, hot and fresh off the GitHub Actions presses, right? We're pulling this image in with the Docker pull command, and then we're actually doing a Docker run. We're running it, and then we're add some sleep time in here to get the service a chance to start up. And then we're running some tests on it. Docker exec service name, and we're using curl to actually test inside the container for these known endpoints and known results. This test could be a little bit more verbose, but I just have these tests here to demonstrate how you could run some tests with your container image. But if the container did not start for any particular reason, then these curls would fail. Number one, we probably wouldn't even be able to exec inside the container, let alone run curl and actually exercise the service to get a result from these endpoints. So we would know right away that something was wrong if either of these particular curls failed. And then just to kind of make sure that our pipeline doesn't run on and on and on, we do have to stop the service, and then we can move on to the deployment step. Okay, this step, of course, it's following the test image step, the one that we just did. And this also has some permissions for the packages read. And I guess I didn't kind of call that out. This one also has permissions to read the package, so it can pull down the container from the package registry. And then we're logging into the registry. We're also authenticating with Google Cloud. So this is really cool, where we can provide secrets, and GitHub Actions has a capability where you can store your credentials inside the service itself, so that GitHub Actions can authenticate with these cloud providers on your behalf. So you don't have to sit there and like log in every single time, or you don't have to leave some long living credential behind, worried that it may be compromised somehow. You can provide your credentials in a very secure way, and then when your pipeline runs, when your workflow runs, it will authenticate for you. Then we set up the Google Cloud CLI because we're running a Google Cloud command. We're actually going to authenticate and configure Docker. This really just sets up the Docker CLI so that we can pull the image from the registry and then tag it and push it to GitHub Container Registry. So sure enough, we pull it, tag it. I like to run image ls just to make sure, as I look through the logs, to make sure that image is truly tagged the way that I intend it to be tagged. That's not a required step. Then we have to push it into GitHub Container Registry. Now, this is kind of where I was getting to before, where we talk about delivery and deployment. Why, you may ask, if we built the image, pushed it into GitHub Container Registry, why then do we need to push it into Google's Container Registry? Well, in this case, is key to the deployment to Google Cloud Run. It used to be the case that you could deploy to Google Cloud Run directly from just about any repository. Some changes to the service now require that you deploy from Google Cloud's container registry. I may be mistaken on that, but please follow me up on that if you know Google Cloud better than I do. And shout out to Tech Culture for calling, which cloud platform. I spend a lot of time in AWS, but I like Google Cloud. Hey, I mean, I don't know. I like working with Google Cloud. I just don't do it as much, right? So we have to push into the Google Container Registry before we can actually run the deployment. So once we push the image there, we also have another action. Again, this is bundled code with all the commands that we would ever need to call. We don't even have to worry about it. We just call this action. We give it the parameters. We tell it the service, the region, and then this is the image that we just pushed up to Google Cloud Registry from GitHub Registry. And it knows that that's where the Google Cloud Run is going to be deployed. So after this step runs, we can actually test the live application in the workflow. Now, all along, I've been talking about testing as we're building so that we can catch problems early. We ran unit tests as soon as we push. We ran integration tests after we built the image. And now it only makes sense that after we deploy, which is still checked just to be sure, right? Just to be sure that whatever we built and deployed is still valid. It's still working the way that we intend it to work. So even after we deploy the application, I like to run one more test. And you may recognize these particular curl commands. They're very similar to the image test or in the test image days, very similar to the commands that we use there. Again, these could be more robust. We could add a little bit more testing to it, but just to kind of give you the idea of how you can use a workflow to test your live application, even after you deployed it, I wanted to have at least a couple commands there. Okay, that's my complete, very, very fast work or walkthrough of a GitHub Actions workflow for a container image. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to take some comments. I want to give a shout out to really, if there's had to be another GOAT in the room, I got to give a shout out to Tamika Reed. Thank you, T. Reed, for joining us today on the stream. Really, really do appreciate having you here. And your comment was that it looks like Ansible. Yeah, it does. GitHub Actions is written in YAML, just about everything else in CI/CD or DevOps these days. And the format does look a lot like Ansible. So yeah, you're going to see that YAML influence pretty much all over the place when you're talking GitHub Actions. Okay, I got a request from Sam to put up the QR code once more. This is a link to the example that I'm working with, so I'll let you take a look at that. I got some other questions here before I get to the questions here. I'll make sure we get through this. Make sure everybody gets a chance to see this. And actually, I'll just leave this on while I go to Tech Coach Ralph's question. He asks, are DevOps engineers still a popular role? We do most of the DevOps work for our project, but we do have an infrastructure team at the company, but nobody with the title DevOps engineer. Yeah, in my opinion, and you can take it for what it's worth, I feel like when DevOps engineer was a role that companies were hiring for or teams were hiring for, it was a wave, right? It was like the term DevOps was finally became popular, or not even popular, it became like common, like Kleenex or like Kool-Aid, it doesn't matter what it is, powdered drink or like a thing that you kind of wipe your nose with, you're still going to call it Kleenex or DevOps because that's what people know, right? So as DevOps became sort of the common name for these tasks that certain people completed, that's what they called them, right? So in that same group, I would put systems administrators to some extent, automation engineers, deployment engineers, and today, or these days, more recently, platform engineers. I would also bundle SREs into that particular role. Each of those roles very similar to a DevOps engineer, but with perhaps a little bit more specific responsibilities, different tasks that each of those roles takes on. But there was also this sort of pushback from people who were in those roles to say, I am not a DevOps engineer. Like, I do not engineer DevOps. I am a site reliability engineer, or I am a platform engineer who happens to use DevOps practices. So DevOps sort of encapsulates the ideals and the tenets and the way that we operate and move when we're working with our code, when we're working with our infrastructure, when we're working with cloud platforms. But you can't, and I mean, hot take, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you can't really be a DevOps engineer, right? You can be a software developer, software engineer, you can be a platform engineer, you can be an SRE like me who uses DevOps practices in your day-to-day work. So I think that's what why the title DevOps engineer kind of fell off, and maybe now it's more like site reliability engineer, system reliability engineer, platform engineer, automation engineer, cloud engineer could kind of come in there, but maybe that's more specific to the cloud platform type thing. So yeah, it kind of depends. Let's see. Okay, and I gotta give a shout out to my homie. Major salute to Angela Andrews. Thank you so much for stopping by the stream, Angela. You're making me get ahead of my slides. You know I like my slides and my banners, right, to keep me on track. I'm gonna hide this particular one. But if you don't know who Angela Andrews is, you need to follow her on LinkedIn. You need to follow her on X. You need to follow her on YouTube, and you need to follow the podcast that I share with Angela from Cover to Code. And I'm going to stop there. I'm going to put a pin in it. I'm going to come back to it in just a second. But yes, Angela, thanks so much for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. And I got more shout outs for you coming to the end of this particular stream here. And I still got my welcome banner up. I probably could have taken that out a long time ago. Let's keep going through the comments here. And Tamika Reed jumping into the conversation here. Some that I forgot. Yeah, DevSecOps, SecOps. Yeah, those also are roles that have very specific tasks or responsibilities, but they also follow DevOps principles. So yeah, definitely important to include them in the the DevOps practitioner bucket, of course. Yeah, I know you're happy to be here, Angela. I'm happy to have you here too as well. There was another question that I saw earlier that I didn't get to. Let's see. It's kind of a mix now, so I will see if I can find it again before we wrap up. And I will stand by for another few minutes to get questions, but I'm going to jump right in and just shout out my homie Angela, because on the next session of CI/CD Summer School, I told y'all this was going to be a very compressed summer, right? Like, we're running out of summer. We don't have time to get through all the things that we would normally do in a 7-8 week long CI/CD Summer School session, right? But in the next session of CI/CD Summer School 2025, we are going to have more office hours, more topics on CI/CD. Come with your questions, come with your hot takes, come with your discussion items, whatever you want to bring to the live stream. We're going to chop it up. And we're also going to have a sneak peek of From Cover to Code. We're coming back for season 3, y'all. Season 3. And basically, the way that we operate, we cover a book per season, and we read that book from cover to cover, but we also dive into the application of the content of that book as code. So first up, we did the DevOps handbook. It was a lot of theory, maybe not too much code in that book, but hey, we'll give it a pass, right? Then we did, what did we do after that, Angela? We did learning, it was AWS Lambda. I can't remember the exact title of the book. And even Tech Kills Ralph saying it's somewhere, but we covered a book on AWS Lambda, SAM CLI, which is now just my go-to. If I ever have to work with Lambda functions on AWS, I start out with SAM CLI just out of the gate. That's kind of where I go to now. So we're going to be discussing how we spent our summer vacations. We were both busy and tied up. That's why we take that summer break, but we're going to come back strong in the fall, to be announced when that first show drops. But we're already setting up for season 3 of From Cover to Code. So I hope that you can join us for the next session of CI/CD Summer School to get that sneak peek and to see what me and Angela have lined up for you on the podcast. Let's see, as we wind down and get ready to land this plane, any other questions on containers, GitHub Actions? Happy to discuss for another minute or two. And I'll just say, yeah, for now, yeah, thanks for joining me. I will see you next time, our next session, Wednesday, August 27th, 3 p.m. And I have to shout out to my man, who was that from Colombia? Carlos. I don't know what time it is in Colombia right now. Colombia kind of lines up with some of the US time zones. I don't know what time it is. Last summer when I was doing CI/CD Summer School, it was a little bit earlier in the day. We had folks joining us from Africa. We had folks from Europe joining the live stream. So I'm sure it's probably late over there for you guys this time around. I hope that you're catching the replay of this. And I look forward to talking to you all soon that are overseas from where I am in the US. And I found it and then I lost it just as quickly. Yeah, so Techo Trout saying like and share the video. I do appreciate those. Definitely like and share so that you can catch up. Oh, okay. And we got Akindeko. That's how I'm going to try to pronounce that. Let me know if that's correct or wrong. And I appreciate you joining us from Lagos. That's really, really cool. I love the global reach of technology because it doesn't matter where you are in the world, but I tell you what, technology is affecting you one way or another. So it's best to kind of get a handle on it and learn how to apply it in our day-to-day. So with that, I think I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to say good night, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is for you. And I will see you on Wednesday, August 27th, 3 p.m. right here on LinkedIn Live or YouTube, depending on where you're joining us from. And like I said, second session of CI/CD Summer School 2025 and a sneak peek of From Cover to Code Season 3. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you soon.